So our scripture passage this morning is from Numbers 25, verses 1 to 13. And I'll be reading from the ESV. While Israel lived in Shittim, the people began to whore with the daughters of Moab. These invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. And so Israel yoked himself to Baal of Peor. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel. And the Lord said to Moses, "Take all the chiefs of the people and hang them in the sun before the Lord, that the fierce anger of the Lord may turn away from Israel." And Moses said to the judges of Israel, "Each of you kill those of his men who have yoked themselves to Baal of Peor." And behold, one of the people of Israel came and brought a Midianite woman to his family in the sight of Moses and in the sight of the whole congregation of the people of Israel, while they were weeping in the entrance of the tent of meeting. When Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, saw it, he rose and left the congregation and took a spear in his hand and went after the man of Israel into the chamber and pierced both of them, the man of Israel and the woman, through her belly. Thus the plague of the people of Israel was stopped. Nevertheless, those who died by the plague were 24,000. And the Lord said to Moses, "Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, has turned back my wrath from the people of Israel, that he was jealous with my jealousy among them, so that I did not consume the people of Israel in my jealousy. Therefore say, Behold, I give him my covenant of peace, and it shall be to him and to his descendants after him the covenant of a perpetual priesthood, because he was jealous for his God and made atonement for the people of Israel."
The story we have in our passage today is really the culmination of another story. And the other story, which was going to be my first choice in preaching this, was actually part of last week's reading, so I wasn't allowed to do it. So, but it's this. If you've read Numbers at all, if you've been reading with us, you know the story of Balaam and how he beat his donkey, and how then the donkey turned around and talked to him, right? And it's quite the stark or interesting story in the Bible. So this Balaam was a seer, they call him, S-E-E-R, a seer. He was one who could see beyond things, and somehow he had a relationship with the God of Israel. He would say the things. He was almost like a prophet, a voice for the God of Israel. And the king of Moab, see, the Israelites had come up and they're all camped there by Moab. The king of Moab knows he cannot defeat these people on his own. He can't bring a military campaign to defeat Israel. And so he gets the idea, I'm going to call for Balaam and have him come and have him put a curse on the Israelites, because everything he blesses is blessed and everything he curses is cursed. So he sent people to Balaam. Long story, not going to get into it. Balaam comes to see King Balak. God's not happy about it. The whole donkey. I had a really pithy title for that. Actually, I better not say that here. Okay. Anyway, this whole thing happens, and Balaam shows up. King Balak takes him up this mountain, and he says, "Okay, curse them." They set up 7 altars. And then Balaam starts to talk, and what comes out of his mouth is blessing, not curse. King Balak is upset. They go to a second mountain. Same thing happens. Blessing comes out, not curse. They go to a third mountain. They're called oracles in the Bible. And he does the same thing. He blesses and he doesn't curse. And so we get the feeling like, well, all's well that ends well. Balaam is a good guy. He's a godly guy, and everything is good with Balaam. Not so fast. Not so fast. Near the end of Numbers, we get this one little verse. It's when the Israelites come in and conquer Moab. After this whole mess is done, the Israelites come in and they conquer Moab. And we get this little verse about what actually happened during our passage. And it's Numbers 31:16, and it says this: "Behold these," and he's talking about the women that went to seduce the men, behold, these on Balaam's advice, caused the people of Israel to act treacherously against the Lord in the incident of Peor. And so the plague came among the congregation of the Lord. After he blesses them, because he can only say what God tells him to do, then he says, okay, you're mad at me. Don't worry about it. I got this other plan. If you do this, they're going to fall. They're just going to fall. This is a great way to go under it all. He was not a good man. He was not a godly man. He was in it for himself, and probably he was very well rewarded for what he said. But that brings us to this story. A story about how to conquer, not with direct attack, but with subtleties. Round the bend, round behind. This is the play, by the way, of the enemy of our souls. He's not going to do the frontal approach. We're too good churchy people to do that, right? We're not going to do anything wicked, right? It reminds me of the phrase, death by 1,000 paper cuts. Little by little by little, and then you are destroyed. Small things lead to catastrophe. Giving in here, giving in there, doing this, doing that, and it leads to catastrophe. So what began as some Moabite women seducing Israelite men ended in all of Israel, it says that in the passage, all of Israel rejecting God and bowing down to the Baal of Peor. Wow, that's a long way from just a few people being seduced, right? Maybe it was way more than a few. So I want us to look at two things here in this passage. The first one is the path of seduction, and the second one is God's response. So number one, the path of seduction. Number two, God's response. There have been many polls, but in a fairly recent poll about the 10 Commandments, people were asked which of the commandments were still to be observed. Well, not surprisingly, murder, lying, and stealing were at the very top. Those are still considered good commandments. We shouldn't murder. We shouldn't lie, though there's a lot of lying going on, but people know it's wrong. We shouldn't steal. People do it a lot, but we know it's wrong. That's still up there. Even other ones like committing adultery, people think that's wrong in general. People do it all the time, but they, in their minds, think that it is wrong. What did not score highly were the first four, but especially the first two. You will have no other gods before me, and you will not make unto yourselves any graven images. These two commandments have been completely pushed out of the public square, and there's a big push for morality, but as defined by our culture, but it's always without God. It's whatever the prevailing view of the day is, and that's what most people buy into as real morality. And then, of course, they redefine what the other commandments are, because it's morality without God. But it actually doesn't work. There's a reason why the first commandment is the first commandment. As Dostoevsky in The Brothers Karamazov, which I've been working my way through, by the way. It's a really interesting book. But what this character argued, if God does not exist, then everything is permissible. Anything and everything is permissible. So the issue here is not really adultery or seduction or illicit sexual encounters. The real issue is what the people believed about God and how they abandoned him so quickly. So way back at the beginning of the journey to the promised land, Moses, you remember, was up on the mountain receiving the law, while at the same time the people were down around a golden calf engaging in God-denying idolatry. They were worshiping this golden calf, because where is this guy Moses? And here we are at the very end of the wilderness wanderings. That was at the beginning. Here we are at the very end, And the people are doing the exact same thing. So the issue is unbelief in the God who had promised them so much. Nothing has changed. But it all seems to start so innocently. Most of you know that my first pastorate was in Chile, South America, in case you didn't know where Chile was. And no, it's not Chili. That's the chili pepper. It's Chile, just in case you didn't know. All right. Within 4 months of my arriving in Chile, we found out that someone was stealing from the offering. This is what they were doing. They were stealing checks. Now, in Chile, checks are like cash. Here, checks are not like cash. But there, if you lose your checkbook, you have to publish it in the paper. Somebody can use your check and cash and get all kinds of money for it. It's like cash. You gotta guard it. And what people were doing was they would write a check to the church, but they would leave the name open so that we could put our church stamp on there that said Iglesia Cristo Rey or whatever it was that they would put on there, on that stamp. So they were open. So what this guy was doing is taking the checks, writing the name of the electric company, going to the electric company and paying the bill. Well, somebody called our church, one of the members said, "Do you guys use our checks to pay bills?" And we're like, "No, we don't." So it was very easy after that point to figure out who did it. We just had to go to the power company, find out who it was, which account got paid and all that. So we discovered him. Now, here's the thing. See, it didn't start that way. The way it started was that he went to, when he was carrying the offering back, they would take the offering and then they would go to a back room. And while he's walking and he has a plate, first it started that he needed change for a 20. You get 2 10s for a 20. The next step was he started borrowing just small amounts of money, just a little bit here and there, but he would pay it back the next week. Then he just took a little bit of money and just put it in his pocket. He forgot to pay it back. But then it got to be more and more until he was so brazen that he would take the checks and he would pay his bills with these checks. But here's the kicker for this. When this guy discovered that we were not going to call the police on him, although I really regret that, we probably should have, it would have been good for him, out of love for him. When he discovered that, he walked away from God completely. He'd been a deacon in our church and he walked away from God. You see how these things work? The spiritual side is always involved in the little things that we do. It started so innocently, but ended in the worst idolatry. He walked away from God and began to worship whatever it was that was around him. See, this is the way it is with porn addiction or with alcohol addiction. This is the way affairs get started. This is the way embezzlement happens. This is the way that a man like Alex Murdaugh is sentenced to 2 life sentences for killing his wife and now is waiting on 99 counts of financial fraud. It all seems to start so innocently, but it ends up in disaster. See, what we have here in our passage is one of the most powerful tools the enemy has in his arsenal. It's sexual attraction. Sexual attraction. Balaam told King Balak that if he could get his Moabite women to seduce the men of Israel, he would be able to conquer them because they would no longer follow their God. And they would assimilate into Moab. He knew what it would do. And that's what they did. It was a foolproof plan. And verse 3 says, "So Israel yoked himself to Baal of Peor." Can you imagine? The people of God, they've seen miracle after miracle, and they yoke themselves to the Baal of Peor. This wasn't just a coldness towards God. This was an out-and-out rejection of the God of Israel, an embracing of a false God. Why did they do this? Well, it's based on their passions and their feelings. Following passions and feelings will always get you in trouble. Certainly King Balak would have selected the most attractive women to send to the camp of Israel or whatever. He would have made sure that it was the right people that had the right personality and the right way of doing everything. And he would send those women there. Now, in the ancient world, what we need to understand is everywhere but Israel, sex was bound up with religion. It was bound up with religion. And so naturally, these women would invite these men to their religious orgies. That's what they would have done. And it sounded very attractive to these men. So the religious belief behind all of it was this. They would engage in sexual activity before their god, Baal, and Baal would be so jealous that he would instigate sexual activity with the goddess Ashtaroth. And from that union, all kinds of fertility would flow out onto the land. And their crops would grow, and they would get rain on the land, and that would come from this. So that's why sexual activity was so deeply tied with their religion. And so these women invite the men to come and do this. And pretty soon, the men are worshiping. They're worshiping Baal as well. See, this idolatry was driven by deepest desires. And I think that's where we always all get in trouble. It's our deepest desires that get us in trouble. If our deepest desires are not after God himself, then it almost always sends us south. I think it's so true for us. Yoga Journal is a popular American magazine that has almost 2 million monthly readers. And there's a 2013 article by Sally Kempton, who's an internationally recognized yoga teacher, where she talks about her philosophy of life. So in regards to the sinful nature, this is what she says. Most of us long ago rejected authoritarian religion with its talk of sin and insistence on eliminating the darker forces within us. So instead, she urges readers to open their lives to the ancient Hindu goddess Durga. And Durga, she says, embodies the inner power to transform yourself, let go of addictions, obstacles, and the illusions and fears that hold you back. She goes on to describe many things that you should do to connect with Durga. And then she says this, the more you invite Durga's energy into your life, the more you'll feel her opening you to your inner warrior. Her power guards your highest aspirations, and she promises never to let you down. So we look at that, and we think, well, we would never probably here be tempted to open our lives to Durga. But we do open our lives in similar ways. Just substitute Durga for whatever it is you are inordinately passionate about. So let's take a couple of them and use that last line. The more you invite into your life the energy that making lots of money gives you, the more you'll feel it opening you to your inner warrior. Its power guards your highest aspirations and promises never to let you down. The more you invite into your life the energy that accomplishing your dreams gives you, the more you'll feel it opening you to your inner warrior. Its power guards your highest aspirations and promises never to let you down. The more you invite into your life the energy that having successful kids gives you, the more you'll feel it opening you to your inner warrior, the power to give advice to everyone, the power to be held in high esteem and envy by those around you. Its power guards your highest aspirations and promises never to let you down. The more you invite into your life the energy that comes from having that special boyfriend or girlfriend, the more you'll feel it opening you to your inner warrior. Its power guards your highest aspirations and promises never to let you down. See, these are the promises that our passions hold out to us. And our culture is telling us, follow your passions because truth is inside of you. Follow them. But of course, it's just not true. People are shipwrecked on the rocks of their passions. They will not guard your aspirations, and they are lying because they always let you down. The Israelites were in danger of losing their entire mission. They were the people of God, and He had promised them a promised land that they would conquer and it would become their own. He promised to be their God and to go before them. He promised them security against their enemies. He promised to love them, and He promised to sing over them. He promised them to make them abundantly significant. Look at all the things that God is promising to His people. But their passions took over, and they weren't thinking straight. They were actually willing to sacrifice all of it on a lie. Where are your passions? Are you sure they'll give you everything you promised, that they promised they'll give you? Number 2, God's response. This is where things get a little bit difficult to understand, I think. Verse 3, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel. Like a fire, kindled. So God is angry with the Israelites. We'll get to the anger in a minute, but He's angry with the Israelites. And He tells Moses, this is what it says, to take all the chiefs of the people and hang them in the sun before the Lord, that the fierce anger of the Lord may turn away from Israel. So He wants him to kill all the chiefs of the tribes, to hang them up. Wow. That's pretty heavy, isn't it? These are probably the people that Moses works with. When he has to get out commands to different things, he goes to the chiefs, or he sends word to the chiefs. They send it to their people, and this is how probably communication happened. They probably helped him to govern and all those kinds of things. They may have been the same as the elders of the people. But if you'll notice, in verse 5, Moses said to the judges of Israel, each of you kill those of his men who have yoked themselves to the Baal of Peor. Now, did Moses obey God there? He didn't, did he? He didn't want to string up the leaders. So Moses is in disobedience as well. So we don't know if it was fear. We don't know if it was weariness with the people, or maybe he thought it was just too harsh. God, you're just being too harsh. I'm not going to do that right now. And then God sends a plague. We don't know exactly when He sent it, although in that verse at the end of Numbers, it said that when they seduced, He sent the plague. 24,000 people died in it. That's according to verse 9. So what brought the end of the plague? We get Pinhas. I'm just impressing you with my Hebrew pronunciation, which is probably bad if somebody knows Hebrew is here. Phinehas, I call him. Phinehas, what it was. Phinehas was the son of Eleazar, who was the high priest at that time. Eleazar was the son of Aaron. Remember, it handed down to the oldest son and then the next. So Aaron was gone. He was dead by now. And so Eleazar, his son, is the high priest, and Phinehas is his son in the high priestly line. And so one of his jobs as a priest, as it was for all of the priests, was to guard the purity of the camp. That was their express job. They were in and around the temple. They were doing the sacrifices. They were all about the purity of the camp. And so there was a problem because the idolatrous behavior had now gone from the Moabite, whatever religion, whatever religious ceremony or orgy went on out there. Now it was being done brazenly in front of all the people. So when God sent the plague, the people were sorry. And they were weeping in front of the tent of meeting. And then comes this man, Israelite man, who brings this Moabitess in front of them all, it says in the passage. They all knew what was happening, took her to his tent, and was going to consummate that relationship inside the tent. And then it says in verse 7, when Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, son of Aaron the priest, saw it, he rose and left the congregation and took a spear in his hand and went after the man of Israel into the chamber and pierced both of them, the man of Israel and the woman through her belly. Thus the plague on the people of Israel stopped. Man, that's some serious drama. Don't you think? That would make an interesting movie, wouldn't it? Be a horror movie. So here's all this very strong information. What are we supposed to do with that? Well, I want us to see what it teaches us about God himself. See, at first glance, it looks like God is this tyrant who can't stand it when people don't worship him. And he'll throw his weight around and it just destroy people. And a lot of people don't want to believe in a God like that. Many people have expressly stated, I won't believe in a God of wrath like that. I only believe in a God of love. But even believers look at that. We look at this and we say, boy, that seems really harsh. We wouldn't do that today. And so what happens in a lot of camps is we try to dumb it down. Some people will say, well, there's a whole theology, that's the God of the Old Testament, but we are under the New Testament, and so it's different now. Or some people go as far as to say, well, it's just metaphorical. It's expressing distaste for sin. Didn't really happen that way, but it's a metaphorical thing. I don't think either one of those are true. This is what I believe. I believe that everything here is true, though it's not exactly what you might think it is. Let me give you some things to think about, and we could discuss it further at another time. Here's the first thing I want you to think about. Anger and hate go hand in hand with love. Anger and hate go hand in hand with love. When your kids make a bad decision that you know is going to lead to harm, one of your emotions is going to be anger as to how they could be so boneheaded. Don't you agree? One of your reactions might be hate at whatever is causing them to make that bad decision. The more harm it causes your child, the more anger and the more your hate at whatever it is. See, they go hand in hand. The more you love something, the more you will hate whatever can cause it damage. So the children of Israel are God's possession. They're God's people, his treasured possession. He tells them that he didn't choose them because they were the most beautiful. He didn't choose them because they were the most talented or the most powerful or the most worthy. He chose them just because he loved them. Just because. They didn't have anything special in them. And then he made this covenant with Abraham and his descendants that he would be their God and that they would live in a covenantal love relationship with him. He didn't destroy them when they complained at Mount Sinai, when they made the golden calf, though there was some punishment there, but he didn't destroy them then. And when they came to the edge of the promised land and they all complained because the giants were too big in the land, he didn't destroy them then either. But here they are, men driven by their passions. They've gone insane. They're putting in jeopardy their entire future, the entire covenant that God made with Abraham, just for a little tryst with an attractive woman that leads to Baal worship. See, it's this defective time horizon, willing to lose anything just to get what is completely temporary. They've actually lost their minds. How many of us have done that? We'll do something now because this is what I want to do right now, knowing that the long-term consequences are not good. Yes, God is angry with them, but not in the reactionary, hot under the collar, you better do as I say way. God is not a reactionary, even though it says his anger was kindled against them. I actually didn't do a study on that word. Wish I had now, because then I could share some things with you. But this is not God. God is not surprised by this. God is not nervous about this. God doesn't have sweat on his upper lip. He's not wondering what's going to happen. See, this is God's measured and loving response to do something drastic to bring them back to their senses. It has to be drastic, or they're just going to go off and get absorbed into Moab. And that's the end of the children of Israel. And where is the story of redemption? Well, God's not having it. He loves them too much for that. If you belong to God, you can count on his disciplining love, and it will be painful. Why? Because he loves you too much to let you go down the wrong path. He loves you too much to give you whatever you want, or to let you have what you're passionate about, or to fulfill all of your greatest desires. Let me drill down a little bit. See, if we don't get our dreams fulfilled, we live in frustration. We live in anger. If our dreams are what we're pursuing, whatever passion it is that we're pursuing, when we don't get it, we are frustrated and feel like life is not good because we're not getting what we want. We dream about it. We envy people that have what we want. That's what social media is all about. Envy, envy, envy. Looking at what everybody else, but of course everybody's putting on their good face so that they look perfect on there. And it's all not true. It's not true. But here's the other side. If we do get our dreams fulfilled, it never fulfills. It's not enough because we'll get that dream fulfilled, but there will always be another one, always another one, always another one. All we have to do is look at Hollywood. They're the most miserable people on earth. See, in either case, there's this dissatisfaction. It's not the path to joy. This is the path of idolatry, and it never gives what it promises. But this is why this story is a story of God's overwhelming love. Do you see that? It's a story of his overwhelming love for his people. He stops them in their tracks so that he can give them all of the things that he has promised them, which is so much better than being conquered by Moab, or worse, Moab's gods. But there's one other thing I want you to see here. And this one's a little harder, but this is it. God's punishment for sin is death. It's death. There's no way to sugarcoat that. That's his punishment. It's not only physical death, which the book of Revelation calls the first death. It's eternal. It's spiritual death. It's separation from God for eternity, which is called the second death in Revelation. Here's the thing. How can a God who lives in unapproachable light, that is brighter than the brightest star, that has no evil, how can he be next to darkness? It's impossible. The light chases the darkness away. It destroys the light. But of course, none of us want to think that we're that darkness. That's reserved for those evil people out there, those people that are ruining their lives, or those people that are ruining what we perceive as ruining our country, those people that do bad things like Alex Murdoch, those people that are causing riots in different places, those people like Vladimir Putin, those are the evil people, the bad people. And we invent our own standard of what God accepts or doesn't accept, but there's no way to sugarcoat this. Anyone who has sinned deserves death. That's the Bible. That's part of the gospel message. But see, if we didn't believe that, then grace wouldn't be grace. The good news wouldn't be good news. We wouldn't care. But we've got to see that. See, if we dumb it down, it always leads in the wrong path. what is amazing is that we're not that different from the children of Israel. We wander all the time. The amazing thing is that we're not destroyed right now, but we look at Phinehas here and we see this bold move because verse 11 says that Phinehas was jealous with God's jealousy. Now, we could do a whole sermon on that. Jealous with God's jealousy. He was willing to do anything to put Israel back on track. And it was certainly a risk for him. So we could praise Phinehas, and yes, it's laudable. But even what Phinehas did has no lasting value. We have talked about this over and over. The sacrificial system had no lasting value. They had to sacrifice for their sins over and over and over and over again. It had no lasting value. What Phinehas did had no lasting value. That's why we've got to look beyond Phinehas. Because everything in the Bible points to something much, much greater. There is one who was much greater than Phinehas. See, Jesus Christ was jealous with the jealousy of God because he was and he is God. Like Phinehas, he would do his Father's will no matter what. He was going to do his Father's will, but he did not come to destroy as Phinehas did, but to save. And just as Phinehas' actions saved the people, so Jesus' actions saved the people. But Jesus didn't kill. He came to be killed. He came to fulfill God's very set rule that the wages of sin is death. He came to put it on himself. Jesus took it on himself. So we may not understand all the harshness in the Old Testament, but one thing we cannot say is that God is not loving and compassionate towards his people. He sent his only Son to take our punishment. Now that's grace. So my question is, in the face of that kind of love, would you be willing to let him have a say in your life? Would you be willing to give him all of your passions and desires? Would you be willing to say that he knows best? Would you be willing to say, not my will, but your will be done? That's the only path to joy. And that's the gospel, and it changes everything. Let's pray.